What's up guys, hello to Football Talk here, week 2 of a Divisional draft and roster review series here on the channel. Once again, I do this for every single division. We started off with the NFC and AFC North last week, as I put the highlight on each of the 4 teams and how they've gone about their respective off seasons. We do this for the lens of the NFL draft, and kind of tie in all the free agency moves and potential trades with how they play off each other and kind of explain the larger picture. So what I'll do here is share a short summary of each player selected by those individual teams, how I think they view their respective role or position within the makeup, and a look at the class as a whole. Then at the end of each video, I compare the 4 rivals against each other and rank how much I personally liked their approach, playing the board, maybe moving up or down the board, or staying in place, the players they selected, and how it all makes sense. Usually I give the disclaimer that there may be a couple names that I didn't get to evaluating, but we're perfect 31 for 31 today in terms of players that we'll be talking about. I don't want to waste any time here, but just real quick, if you enjoy my breakdowns, please hit the like button for me real quick and consider subscribing to the channel. I'll have you covered all off season with discussions about the league as a whole, individual teams, all 22 analysis. I hope you join along for the ride. You can find a link to my site helloswithfootballtalk.com and timestamps for the individual teams in the video description. Let's get into the NFC East now, starting with the Dallas Cowboys, who in the first round 12th overall selected Tyler Booker, interior offensive lineman Alabama, second round 44th overall Donovan Siraku, edge defender Boston College, third round 76th overall Savon Revel, cornerback East Carolina, 5th round 149th overall Jaden Blue, running back Texas, and then 3 picks later Shamar James, the linebacker of Florida, 6th round 204th overall Ajani Cornelius, offensive tackle Oregon, and then 3 7th rounders, 217th overall Jay Toya, interior defensive lineman UCLA, 249th overall Phil Maffa, the running back out of Clemson, and then 247th overall Tommy Akingbizote, interior defensive lineman Maryland. Which, before we go through the individual selections, I feel like I need to point out how many larger reclamation projects as former first rounders Dallas traded for, former Bills cornerback Kaya Elam, Titans/Chargers linebacker Kenneth Murray, and quarterback Joe Milton just heading into year 2 after costing the Patriots the first overall pick by winning the meaningless Week 18 game. As for Booker at the top, this guy looks like he was built in a lab to play guard, with a dense, powerful frame at 6'5", probably playing around 330 pounds, has an absolutely massive lower half that he can unleash in the run game, especially when allowed to wash on the backside and open up highways behind his back. Brings so much torque with his upper body to get the lineman out of the lane in wrestling matches, and small defenders are forced to make business decisions when he uses a puller. In pass pro, he showcases an excellent understanding for how to adjust his technique based on when the ball is supposed to come out, as well as where to help if he doesn't have a direct assignment, with sudden hands and the anchor to absolutely stonewall bull rush attempts. I think he lacks the reactionary agility and loosens in his hips to respond accordingly to and wall off a defender on the move trying to backdoor him, and he doesn't have the elite foot quickness to mirror those quick twitch interior rushes all the time, where he has a tendency of leaning into his man later in the rep. This is someone who definitely excels in the phone booth rather than in space, but you don't want to get into that arena with him. The Alabama program has called him the Will Anderson offense on multiple occasions, and I think he immediately boosts that run game, even though it's like Martin, who clearly slowed down before getting banged up last year. Dallas now has this weird thing with Tyler's on the O-line in the first round, between Tyler Smith, Guyton, and now Booker, along with formerly Tyler Smith, but even though this was a little surprising, in the grand scheme of things, he makes a lot of sense, and I can't wait to see him go up against Jalen Carter again. Then Donovan Siraku was one of the most productive pass rushers in the country last season, and rarely ever came off the field for BC. Comes out of his stance low and with his hands ready to strike, actively working off contact, great agility to redirect as he deciphers plays, which is backed up with the athletic testing, and winds out of his stance with the ability to win a corner, but also has a knack for altering step cadence, throwing in some wicked Eurostep moves. Additionally, he's capable of angling his rush to condense the pocket if tackles set to soft on him, and he shows an advanced ability to counter the hands of pass protectors and still win later in the rep. Siraku played around 240 pounds and can be neutralized by large tackles who get into his frame early, which won't allow him to set the firmest edge versus the run, and on too many rush reps, he tries to slow play off the line and take advantage of undisciplined tackles as he reacts to their movement, but they can't build up the bull rush on a short runway to still affect the pocket. So not at the end I expected Dallas necessarily to pair with Mark Parsons. When you look at more of the prototype strong side guy, like a DeMarcus Lawrence previously, but in terms of guys who can consistently win in defined dropback settings, this is the guy. And he comes about 15 picks later than where he probably should have been. Speaking of discounts, I had this next guy about 40 spots higher on my personal big board than where I was ultimately picked, even taking the standard torn ACL into account, which will have been basically exactly 1 calendar year once they opened the season at Philadelphia since the injury, assuming there's no other structural damage that I'm not aware of, and that's Von Revel from East Carolina, who has an incredible size speed profile at 6'3", 195 pounds a corner, nearly 33-inch arms, and according to Bruce Feldman's freak list, he ran a 4.4 last summer. Has some real shock in his hands to throw off guys at the line and just bullet a bunch of the receivers he faced in college. Yet if he did occasionally lose face momentarily, he had the easy gas to catch back up. He adjusts drop patterns with good eye balance and clearly breaks on them as they play out, with the length to compete at the catch points. Plus in the run game, he can punch off blockers and meet bigger runners around the line of scrimmage, and has been a forceful tackler. He does have that leggy build and may struggle to clean the transition when applying actual press technique and having to stick to pro talent across from him, while Revel's mental fortitude to ID route combinations and position himself optimally as his own defending conflict definitely has room upwards, will occasionally get caught with his eyes out of place. In terms of top and ceiling, Revels is about as high as any corner, not named Travis Hunter in this class, and he's a very different player profile of course, with the two-way ability. If there's nothing throwing off this guy's recovery still, and he can get some of the things cleaned up where he's a little rough around the edges, he could absolutely make Trevon Diggs expendable next offseason when that guy's dead cap hit massively decreases, and that may be a solid trade market for him. Next up, running back Jaden Blue, who was a former top 200 national recruit, who was never the number 1 for Texas, but delivered plenty of big plays for them, runs the ball for wiggle to set up defenses, and then the acceleration to exploit open lanes, with the burst to easily win the corner perimeter plays, has the ankle mobility to execute sharp cuts, it doesn't need much space to slide through, with the 4-for-8 wheels to take the ball to the house, has natural hands and can embarrass linebackers in man coverage, where he regularly throws in a little stutter and then gets on top of guys on streak or wheel routes. He severely lacks power to break tackles and gets banked on pretty hard on contact by bigger defenders, regularly thought he'd be able to come free but got pulled down somehow, very limited work in pass pro, and just lacks the mass to really be effective in that area, and he simply allows his elbow to swing too wide and exposes the ball to swatting arms, especially when there are multiple tacklers around him. That's why he fumbled 7 times across 255 touches since 2023. So considering what the running back market looked like at that moment, this was definitely early for me at the top of round 5, because of the depth of the class. To me, Blue is an RB3 who can contribute above that when you heavily deploy him as a receiver and space player, but he's not going to see the field if he doesn't clean up his ball security. Really the only thing happening in Dallas' backfield this offseason is Rico Dowdle being swapped out for Javonte Williams, but this feels like it could be the end of the road for Deuce Vaughn, with a similar profile for that team as Blue. 3 picks later, linebacker Shamar James, another very high recruit 3 years ago for the Gators, who became the leader of that defense. Easy lateral movement, an easy lateral mover, shuffling over the top of traffic or scraping from the backside of run calls while keeping his shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage. Instantly IDs and fills in a hurry when he sees someone pulling his way, and has the stopping power to deny yards of the contact, and he commands plenty of space in zone coverage and is able to decipher from multiple routes in his vicinity, oftentimes flying underneath deep crossers or carrying the number 3 in trips. He takes some chances to backdoor blockers to make a play when he should funnel the ball back to his teammates inside, and has a tendency of overflowing from the backside. While he missed a career worst 17.3% of attempted tackles this past season, where too often he got caught flat-footed in space and ended up clutching areas he left his feet. That is something he absolutely needs to clean up, but the way I put it in my scouting report, if you're looking for an energetic, rangy leader in the middle of a defense, James will present a great value option. Here in the 5th round, I can see him beating out Kenneth Murray and eventually start alongside the Marvin Overshown. In the 6th round, Johnny Cornelius, a 4-year starter right tackle for the Ducks, who clearly wasn't as fluid or athletic as his counterpart on the blind side in Josh Connolly Jr., which is why that guy went in the 1st round, but was almost equally effective these last couple of years arguably. Big time grip strength and ability to wash on interior defenders in a significant fashion to blow open a massive lane for pullers to wrap around, shows the short area agility to escort the ball to the perimeter on wide zone concepts or scoop block free techniques away from the action, consistently is able to square pass rushers off the edge and force them to go through him, keeping his weight centered and having a strong lower half to negate power rush attempts. You see him wind up excessively too often trying to connect with his hands in the run game, and his feet look rather heavy in space, while in pass pro, he doesn't have the smoothest kick slide and tend to extend his legs too far, limiting his redirection skills, where he'll get caught on some inside counters by guys that can threaten the corner initially. So I always see it as a downgrade from what was my OT3 in Connolly, who I was a huge fan of, but not to the tune of 5 rounds. I think Cornelius can be a rock solid swing tackle for Dallas, who immediately beats out any of the guys they have beyond the starting duo as I look at the current depth chart. 3 more 7th rounders, which I'll try to be quicker on. First with Jay Toya, the UCLA D tackle, brings that wide, chunky build with plenty of junk in the trunk, but regularly was first off the ball and arrived on the other side of the neutral zone with some violence, excels at dropping his knee and anchoring against double teams, brings a whopping initial club to turn the upper body of pass protectors inside, and all I thought there were some skills and a willingness to tap into a deeper bag of rush moves to pair up with his power. His initial hand quickness into contact does show up when he's not able to maintain separation from blockers in the run game, and he doesn't yet show much of a rush plan, where too often people catch him under his chest as he tries to hit a swim move over them. Supposedly there was something going on medically, but this is someone I got to late in the process. I personally viewed as more like a 5th rounder, who I would not be shocked if he significantly eats into the playing time of former 1st rounder Mazi Smith. Then Phil Maffa from Clemson, a rugged 6'1", 235-pound power back, who set the tone for the Tiger offense. You see him kind of glide laterally and then pound his cleats into the ground to get vertical as he allows a crease to develop before grinding through defenses. Clearly has the mass and competitive nature to get the job done as a personal protector, but isn't going to blow you away with his explosion through the line of scrimmage or the ability to take the distance. And basically all he did in the passing game throughout his time at Clemson was run swing and flat routes, where I wouldn't expect a whole lot more due to being pretty tight-hipped. You're looking at Miles Sanders to probably beat out for one of those spots on the active roster. Not that it's a massive mountain to climb, it probably requires an injury or late cut to get a chance for a handful of snaps as a rookie. And finally, Tommy Akinbizote, the other Maryland D tackle, consistently the enforcer at the first point of attack to stand his ground as a run defender and capable of crashing through one shoulder of blockers. While as a pass rusher, he was able to get some good push up the middle of the pocket and can drive through contact with the rip move, but when he tries to go around guys, he simply can't get those hips aimed at the quarterback, trying to corner his rush and gets taken off track. And not much of a playmaker in the run game necessarily, will shed blocks and create negatives at a high rate. So with Toya and Solomon Thomas behind the 2 starters, this is another guy battling last year's 7th rounder Justin Rogers as more of a massive nose for privileges of getting called up to the active roster. That would be my guess right now. All in all, I thought the Jones family and director of personnel Will Clay put together another very strong class, where last year felt more like an aberration compared to the usual standards. I may disagree with how they handle some of the personnel decisions, and especially when it comes to getting contracts with the star players done early to keep them happy and provide yourself financial flexibility down the road, but they can freaking draft. Booker 12 may be a little earlier than I expected, but I would be shocked if he isn't a quality starter for his team. Big time value with Izaraku and Revel, who may be starters on the edge and corner, 2 high value positions by 2026. Didn't love Blue as the choice of running back, but then he might have found a starting linebacker, at least if Shamar James lives up to my expectations. And the quality swing tackle Cornelius, both in the middle of day 3, along with Jay Toya being someone I believe will be a piece of the rotation up front throughout his rookie deal. Did I expect him to take a wide receiver at some point? For sure. But with that run on day 2, I can fully understand cashing on value in other areas with falling players, and maybe they just didn't love anyone beyond that point. Plus 2 weeks later they ended up trading for George Pickens from Pittsburgh, who may be a bit of a head case, but right now is probably as good as anyone they could have drafted entirely. Now they have to convince us that Brian Schottenheimer was anything but a comfort signing for Jerry, and that coaching staff can actually get the best out of the talent. Next up, the New York Giants, who furthermore selected Abdul Carter, the edge defender out of Penn State, then traded back into the first round 25th overall for Jackson Dart, quarterback Ole Miss, 3rd round 65th overall Darius Alexander, interior D lineman out of Toledo, 4th round 105th overall Cam Skadaboo, running back Arizona State, 5th round 154th overall Mark Simbo, offensive tackle / interior O lineman out of Purdue, and then 2 7th rounders, 219th overall Thomas Fidone II, tight end Nebraska, and 249th overall Corey Black, cornerback Oklahoma State. Abdul Carter at number 3, the no-brainer here, as the only true franchise quarterback option in Cam Ward, and the unicorn of the class in Travis Hunter were off the board, transitioned from an off-the-ball designation, where he was already playing in this pretty multifaceted role, and showed he can be a force as a full-time edge last year. This guy has the suddenness to step and dip around blockers, or backdoor guys on zone concepts, but also fully willing to just crash full throttle into pulling guard. His combination of speed and bend to win the corner as a pass rusher is elite, and he's already shown plenty of growth in deploying different hand combats, working off counters, creating favorable angles for himself, and he'll just run down random quarterbacks as if they're his prey. He's still developing the right feel for when to actually sidestep blockers at the point of attack without compromising the rest of the defense, and set the edge with great technique. And he was flagged 7 times last season, trying to guess and jump the snap corner most of them, resulting in offside penalties. This was my number 1 player in the class, and just the cleanest I would argue, because there are no questions which side of the ball he'll play on. You can question how exactly the Giants will use their guys up front this season specifically, since they just picked up Kayvon Thibodeau's 50 option and traded for Brian Burns last offseason, who they immediately extended. So is there a world where Carter officially starts some games as an off-ball player? I see him being used a lot as a chess piece on obvious dropbacks, moving along the front and rushing from various angles. And then the quarterback, they gave up a 3rd round at this and next year, so 99 and whatever the 2026 one ends up being, to move up 9 spots here. Dart put up big numbers on the Lane Kiffin with the Rebels, operating this aggressive passing attack. A good-sized athlete with NFL arm talent, a strong base, and as someone who's tough as nails with pressure coming in around him. When Dart catches a safety leaning too far one way, or gets someone in the post to open his hips, he's very willing to rifle in shots up the seam or routes breaking across the face. I really appreciate how Dart always tries to work up into the pocket and trusts his protection to afford him that space, rather than trying to go sideways or further backwards as he hangs onto the ball longer. But man, so much of his production was based on RPOs, quick rhythm play action, and only being required to read one half of the field. He needs to learn when to just live for another down and throw the ball out of bounds instead of forcing it to his guys as he gets into chaos mode with a couple of mind-numbing decisions. And while I love the toughness, Dart needs to learn how to protect himself better, not take as many big shots in the open field, as that Will Levis illness at times it seems. So for as productive as Dart was at Ole Miss, it's tough to project his transition to the next level. I looked at him more as a mid-day 2 prospect, who has a long way to go having to solve more complex defensive structures, where the answers aren't handed to him as regularly, but they didn't end up having to pay up massively in the trade, and I see the intrigue of what he could be. I just don't love having him along with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston now. That organization kinda needed to do this to keep everyone invested, but I do think we see Darts enter the lineup by mid-season, and that would be a situation where neither veteran is able to truly take advantage of that situation. Darius Alexander from Toledo is a 6'4", 305-pound Tasmanian devil on the interior, fully utilizes those 34-inch arms to knock back and lock out in the run game, staying firm at the line of scrimmage against the run, with the strong upper body to discard blockers as the ball carrier approaches. Then there's so much violence in his hands to jolt back the passive offensive linemen and turn the bodies when he lands his club against the elbow or wrist, or just crashes across the face. For his body type, Alexander's ability to bend as a looper and get underneath the reach of tackles around the edge definitely pops, and he's regularly able to free himself late from stalemates in passing situations. He could certainly still improve his ability to ID the first steps of the O-line and counter blocking schemes instead of just charging into bodies at times, and still gets pretty wild with his hands and fails to pull off pass rush moves cleanly without the best foot quickness to do so. So I saw a path for a 60th senior who still needs to refine some areas of his game to get here, but I think this was a top 50 prospect in the class who can wreak a lot of havoc. Now you add him alongside Big Dexter Lawrence with the trio of edge defenders. We're going back to the early 2010 days when Big Blue was able to take over games with the D-line. I think they take a massive jump immediately in the run defense, and they could be truly scary with all the different ways they can attack the pocket. Then Cam Scatterby from Arizona State, absolutely perfect back, going to Jersey with his maniacal running style. Comes in with a low center of gravity and a dense frame, pretty light on his feet to make subtle shifts and knife through between blockers, paces his run with an adequate level of patience and advanced vision for a college back, and whether it's conceptually or with sheer will, he will bleed out the most he can get out of the opportunities he's given. And he doesn't give enough credit for what he provides as a receiver, where he looks very comfortable splitting or motioning out wide, has reliable hands, and there's no fluff getting up the field. We never got a 40 time on him, but he may run in high 4.6s without the speed to really burn angles or pull away from defensive backs, and I wouldn't call him a dynamic space player. Plus he does a lot of elbow with his carrying arm to swing pretty far and exposes the football to getting punched out, which is the one thing he needs to fix immediately. But what a fun 1-2 punch between him and another D3 pick from last year I liked a lot in Tyron Tracy. The pure juice Scatterby brings to the table is what turns some people off, but his ability to consistently get you 5 yards, convert in short yardage situations, and just get the job done any way you ask of him, I think we see both of those guys get plenty of opportunities. Then Marcus Mbow from Purdue is someone I label as one of the biggest steals of the entire draft, who moved over from right guard to tackle this past season by the Boilermakers, but with 32-inch arms he's expected to slide back inside at the next level. Does very well to connect his feet and hands as a run blocker, with tremendous flexibility and body control to attach to combos and stay connected on challenging angles, so light on his feet securing targets in space, or pulling all the way across the formation, adjusting his path as the picture changes. And as a pass protector, he shows the ability to utilize individual hand usage, along with the oily hips to scramble, recover, and still get the job done, even if he loses early in the rep. And Bo presents more of a narrow build, especially projecting him to move back inside the next level, and he relies heavily on momentum into contact. And he also makes himself vulnerable by getting top heavy in pass pro, where there can be some segmentation between his strike and his feet, to where he saw defenders crash through the inside door quite a bit. Still, I thought this guy was more likely to sneak into round 2 than make it all the way to the 5th. Maybe the Giants give him a year to get stronger, in his core especially, but I see this guy starting at any of the different interior spots by 2026 to be honest, especially if they find ways to weaponize him on the move. And then the 2 7th rounders, first with Thomas Fidone from Nebraska, who was just ahead of Raiders record-breaking rookie tight end Brock Bowers back in 2021 recruiting rankings, but lost a couple of years initially with knee injuries, which is why he made it all the way to round 7. But brings his hips and runs his feet for contact as he fits up into defenders around the line of scrimmage as a blocker, while having clearly become stronger and having those 34-inch arms to expand his room for error. Clearly gets out of his stance with no wasted movements and shows impressive detail in his routes, softening the edges of defenders playing off on him and changing tempo, consistently plucks the ball out of the air with those large mids and strength at the catch points, before showing great balance and awareness for nearby defenders with the ball in his hands. He dropped some weight for the combine down to 243 pounds, but already got jolted back on contact by physical linebackers when tasked with lead blocking duties, as well as getting bumped off track in some of his routes. And he was penalized 6 times last season, as he allows his hands to slip outside the frame of opponents later in the down. Theo Johnson is a very talented pass catcher at the tight end spot, who they picked early in the 4th round last year. Daniel Bellinger they like a lot as your more typical inline Y, but Fidone's upside in the receiving game is higher than all of those, and if he's fully healthy, I could see him lead the possession catches or the second half of his rookie year. That's how much I like it. Finally, Corey Black from Oklahoma State, someone I got to late in the process because I saw Dane Brugler had him as a 4th rounder. I think this makes a lot more sense based on the tape I watched, rather than relying purely on the physical profile. 6 foot 190 pounds with 32-inch arms and 4.35 speed to hang with go routes or make up for losing off the line. Redirects out of his pedal with good burst and match assignments, doing a great job of playing to his leverage, and he comes in low and clutches the leg of ball carriers as a perimeter tackler, but technically raw, opening the wrong wings on off-zone assignments, and getting caught in bad positions. Savvy route runners able to give Black trouble by giving him false indicator recepts at the top of the route when he's in trail position and shaking them off, and he's not dying to get off his island and run supports. So I looked at him as more of a shot in the dark, betting on the trades, but with the like to tap the corner for New York, he has a strong chance of making that roster, or do I like to see them add one more cheap veteran to that room? In summary, the G-Men got some of my favorite values of any team in this past draft. Carter at 3 was a layup. Alexander at the top of the 3rd, I love to finalize what the defensive front can look like. Scadaboo is absolutely perfect for this organization, and as the bruising complement to Tracy. Mboa called one of the biggest steals at the time already, and Fidone has real potential as a volume pass catcher at tight end, even though Malik Neighbors of course should be a target magnet for this team heading into year 2. The only thing I didn't love was trading up for Dart, but the compensation was very fair, and now you add that 50 option, although the construction of this quarterback room feels clunky. Black at the end is a high upside Dart. I thought they did a great job of working with what they had, and his operation of Brian Daboll, Matt Kafka, Shane Bowen, and Joe Shane need to make some noise this year in order for all of them to stick around. I believe in his coaching staff. The GM got dragged through the mud for not paying Saquon Barkley last offseason, even though he would have never even come close to those historic numbers that he put up in that offense. I'm not saying I agreed with every move, but I'll be fair in saying that I've generally liked a lot of the draft prospects they've brought in, even if they haven't all panned out, and this may be the strongest class yet. Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who made the most selections of these 4 NFC East teams with 10. In the 1st round, 31st overall Jaha Campbell, linebacker Alabama, 2nd round 64th overall Andrew Mukuba, safety Texas, 4th round 111th overall Ty Robinson, interior D lineman Nebraska, then 3 5th rounders, 145th overall Mac McWilliams, cornerback / safety UCF, 161st overall Smile London Jr., linebacker Georgia, and 168th overall Drew Kendall, interior offensive lineman Boston College, and then 4 6th rounders, 181st overall Cal McCord, quarterback Syracuse, 191st overall Miles Hinton, offensive tackle Michigan, 207th overall Cameron Williams, another offensive tackle out of Texas, and then 209th overall Antron Powell-Ryland, the edge defender out of Virginia Tech. So first with Campbell from Bama, which the Eagles sent pick 164 to the team they just beat in the Super Bowl to swap those final two selections of night 1 to secure themselves the falling, uber-talented linebacker who originally was recruited as an edge defender, but after getting stuck behind guys like Will Anderson, Dallas Turner and others, he broke out as an off-ball player his junior year. This is a freaky athlete with plus length for a backer to keep blockers at bay, but it's a short area burst to shoot through gaps or crack on perimeter plays that really stands out. There's a looseness to how this guy maneuvers in coverage, and he has the range to affect the catch point significantly off his landmarks, where you can mug him up in the A-gap and still hang with a running back into the flats or tighten up the seam. You see some pretty good versatility to blitz from multiple alignments, and line up on the edge on a few third downs, showing impressive flexibility around the arc or turning tight corners of cross action. This is not someone who embraces, much less thrives in head-on collisions with linemen, and I didn't see the heavy hands to be trusted extensively to set the edge in the run game, and he lacks some technique as a pass rusher, relying mostly on athleticism and not showing the actual counters with his hands to have the same success as you see with evading round blockers. But as he continues to improve his spatial awareness and zone coverage, he has the capability of being an all-round impact player in the front seven, which defensive coordinator Vic Fangio will have a lot of fun with, especially watching his reactions to Kieran Campbell on draft day. Now you pair him up with last year's All-Pro Zach Baum, considering the Kobe Dean may miss most of 2025 it seems, and you can really be a me-big in who drops down in your 40 front packages, changing blocking angles with the snap imminent, the range of those two guys flying around. This could be highly interesting to watch. Then in the second round, Andrew Mukuba from Texas, slightly undersized safety, who plays with a chip on his shoulder and made his presence felt for the Longhorns last year after transferring over from Clemson. Trusts his eyes and attacks plays in front of him with conviction, where he can mitigate negative box counts as that extra layer of a run defense or shutdown plays hitting out wide. Has been a versatile piece in the secondary for two high-class programs with the mental fortitude to take care of a variety of zone assignments and line up pretty much at any spot in the secondary, where you see him undercut routes as a whole player or separate guys from the ball breaking towards the middle in front of him. And he shows no wasted movement and long legit speed to take on extensive man coverage duties against slot receivers, illustrated by a 4.4 at the combine. Mukuba can get too aggressive with his angles from depth and how he arrives at the ball without breaking down, which leads to quite a few missed tackles, and his playing style may not lend itself to a lot of single high snaps, where prior to this past season, he didn't have a whole lot of experience in that role either, as you see him excessively gain depth. But what Fangio asks of that position, protecting the deep areas of the field in shell coverages, but then trusting your eyes when it's match assignments, this guy's perfect. Moving on from Johnson Johnson, I think Mukuba battles Sidney Brown for one of those starting safety jobs, but we'll see both along with Reed Blankenship to get on the field a whole lot, because Brown can be a big nickel or dime backer as we get to those longer downs. Next up, Ty Robinson from Nebraska, someone I knew would be lower on consensus, although I understand the intrigue for someone at 6'4", right around 300 pounds, running the fastest 40 of any D tackle at the combine, and finished top 4 in the group in every single other drill as well, has a quick first step, and refuses to lose leverage on his gap, capable of squeezing through creases, and showing the active hands to work off contact and get involved in gang tackles. He impresses with his burst when he has to redirect and chase down longer developing plays, screens, or quarterbacks pulling the ball. And his best reps rushing over guards come when adding a little shake or jabbing inside before arm-overing them the opposite way, where he combines a hefty club with the ability to turn his shoulders 90 degrees in order to not be walled off. I thought during Senior Bowl week, he generally struggled to really threaten the edges of blockers' frames during one-on-ones, and while there's some tightness in his lowers to actually corner his rushes, and he needs to become quicker with IDing the action and responding accordingly, not allowing himself to be sealed off as much. I believe Robinson played with some excess weight and came in 22 pounds lighter at the combine than what Nebraska had listed him with that. I view him as someone who Philly rotates in as a B-cap player who can slide outside as a strong side at the end at times when they add one of those linebackers to the opposite edge. They needed to replenish some of that depth on the D-line, and this works out for them, getting this high upside guy I believe. Then in the 5th round, Mac McWilliams from UCF. I was a little surprised that he got picked at the top of the 5th, while his teammate BJ Adams went undrafted, but someone with more physicality, who some people rejected to move to safety at the next level, has those heavy hands to bother the guy across from him at the line, with some vigorous 200 jams, but pairs up with pretty calm feet, operates with great route anticipation based on splits and game situation, including from the slot, with his understanding for where he has help, and great awareness for routes in his vicinity, and a feisty defender in the run and screen game, punching and pulling off blockers to get to the ball, where he showed no hesitation of involving himself against condensed formations, but he's only 5'8", 180 pounds, with arms barely over 30 inches, and limited speed to hang with people on the perimeter, and he dives headfirst way too much as a tackler, leading to a career miss rate of nearly 30%. This was a bit of a surprise, and this along with Ty Robinson were the two selections I deemed slightly early actually, but he liked the versatility potentially coming for snaps basically anywhere in the secondary. But then Smile Munden from Georgia was my number 6 linebacker in the class, and I think qualifies as a massive steal here, described as the best athlete they've had in the front 7 recently by Kirby Smart, which is a pretty insane statement to make, looking at the guys that have come from Athens. If a lane opens up for him, Munden gets through it in an instant and sets up negative plays, and can clean up for a defense if the runner bounces out wide or the quarterback pulls the ball. Tremendous asset as a QB spy, with his ability to track and run on scramblers, but can also throw in some shoulder shakes and crash one half of pass protectors and Adam Blitzer, and what it gives you immediately as man coverage skills, where you legitimately see him stick with slot receivers on drag routes, and he can be a tight end eraser. Built on the smaller end, and his frame may not carry a whole lot more weight, where you see him get put on his backside by offensive linemen occasionally, and Munden lacks reliable pass rush moves or counter hand combats to win one-on-one battles at a high rate. I'm guessing foot injuries each of the past 2 years knocked him down a peg, but I viewed this guy as a potential start at the next level, and at worst, should be a high value package play for Philly, where they can deploy as a matchup piece against teams with a great receiving tight end, who they move around the formation. Next is Drew Kendall from Boston College, a little smaller but a super crafty center, quickly eliminates space to first level defenders, takes optimal angles and wins the leverage battle on the majority of snaps, glides up to the second level under good control, but can also really get on his horse and pull up to the corner and secure moving targets, packs a tight punch in pass pro, and makes up for not having the strongest lower half by popping his feet back, straining and extending through his joints in order to slow down powerful bull rush attempts. You see him get banged backwards by shades on simple down blocks, and he tries to make up for his lack of brute strength by leading into contact with his pads at times, and he could struggle to hold his own on an island in protection against powerful D tackles with little sand in his pants. So I thought he'd be pigeonholed into being a center only, and this is about the range I expected him to go, but there weren't really any better values on day 3 to back up Cam Jurgens, who he recently handed a big contract extension to. Bringing us to the 4 6th rounders, first with Kyle McCord from Syracuse, who transferred from Ohio State this past season and took massive strides while turning the Orange into one of the most explosive aerial attacks in the country. I thought he really tightened up his throwing motion, cleaned up his drops, and delivered the ball with more conviction to let his arm talent shine last season, erasing the myriad of double clutches for the most part. Trusts his receivers to be at the right spot, where he has to let the ball go early, in particular if pressure imminent, and can do so while slightly fading away. His most impressive throws to me have come when he has little room to step into them, with the rush closing in, yet he puts it to a spot for his receiver 15-20 yards down the field, well before they get there. He still needs to improve his eye discipline, even when he knows where he's going to go with the ball, in order to not allow nearby defenders to drive on the route and dish out hospital shots to his receivers, and he's average at best for NFL standards in terms of athleticism, where he's simply missing the quick burst to slip through creases or the speed to outrun pursuing rushers. Adam McCord is my QB7, and I thought he had a good chance of going day 2, so even though he's not the same style as Jalen Hurts of course, he has the ability to become the best backup they've had there during that time, and could really take advantage of those pieces around him if thrown into the lineup. A couple of offensive tackles here next, and Miles Hinton from Michigan, 6'7", 325 pounds, can really sit low in his stance thanks to the mobility in his lower half, and gets that massive a man moving with twitch and great pad level off the snap, narrows those hands with his feet, and creates significant displacement on down and drive blocks, but also shows impressive agility and longer pulls, patient but rangy with better than 34-inch arms, not lunging on contact as a pass protector, and shows busy eyes if there's no immediate job for him, has too much of a wind-up at times trying to connect in the run game, and ends up on the turf more than you like to see, with some heavy feet trying to redirect in second level, and he's generally reactive in his approach, with low and late hands that don't always allow him to dictate the rep, relying on a bunch of diagonal sets where it leads into defense at the top of the rush. While Cameron Williams from Texas is an incredibly talented one-year starter for the Longhorns at 6'6", 320 pounds, shows an explosive first step to create impact in the run game, where he seems steamrolls an interior D lineman, has the force in his hands to steer moving targets off track in order to spring the ball loose later into reps or put guys into the ground as they try to throw secondary pass rush moves at him, and he puts people in a cage when he's able to get those large pods buried into the frame with a seemingly unbreakable anchor when he has his feet underneath himself. Cam gets way too top heavy in the run game and allows defensive linemen to slide off his blocks, while overall his footwork could use some refinement, which you can also see in pass pro with some heel clicks, and relying on his strike with the inside hand to cut off crossface moves rather than actually purposefully stepping with the post foot. Which is why so many people were surprised they didn't go back to college for one more year, probably got some bad advice there and falling all the way to the 6th round. But both of them are projects to a certain degree, especially with Williams, yet I thought both came at great value, and I trust O-line coach Seth Stoutland so much that if Lane Johnson decides to retire in a couple of years, while still close to the top of his game based on his past season, I think one of them can definitely replace him. In the meantime, they may stick with their respective sides from college as the primary backups of those. Finally, Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech, one of the most productive edge rushers in the country last season, although he faced some challenges transitioning to the pros at only 6'2", 255 pounds, with arms barely over 31 inches, quick processor who can ID and counter different blocking schemes at an advanced level for the college game, crafty pass rusher with the hand usage of an NFL veteran, as well as a knack for altering stride length and tempo in his approach. His quick hand swipes are too much for guards to handle when he rushes over them, and he ends up getting grabbed a few times on the snaps while executing stunts and twists with great timing. He regularly turns his shoulders and doesn't concern himself with setting a firm edge in the run game without the length to lock out against guys, and he doesn't have those elite quicks, flexibility or length to bank on as an NFL pass rusher, as the gap technically will close down, not facing pro competition all the time. Maybe never going to be a big time piece of an NFL rotation, but to give you 5 or 6 impact rush reps per game if he earns those on special teams, I think this was another really nice find at the back end of round 6. Altogether, I thought this was another masterclass by General Manager Howie Roseman, who I understand some people have gotten annoyed with the media crowning him as this genius, when so often they end up drafting basically the highest remaining player in consensus boards. But in the long run, that strategy is going to pay off, as other teams get overconfident in their evaluations and ignore what may be the best value on paper. Without insight on Campbell's medicals, it's tough to weigh how much that should have dropped him, but based on tape, they got a top 20 prospect in the class at 31. Mukura was right there for me as a top 5 safety. Robinson and McWilliams, I said, were the two guys I personally valued about a round later than where they actually came off the board, but then absolutely killed it the rest of the way. I think at worst, after that point, they'll end up with a starting tackle, a sub-down linebacker who fills a valuable role, that backup center and quarterback for the next 4 years, and that's for a team that was already loaded. Howie finally picked the linebacker in round 1, and the safety higher than what he usually do, so it's not just a strict principle of always getting the big guys early, as they instead found great value there late, before adding a couple more talented dudes to Chef Stoutland University. Really not much to critique here whatsoever. Which brings us to our last team for the day, the Washington Commanders, who sneakily only made 5 selections due to a couple of trades that I'll reference here in a second. In round 1, 29th overall, Josh Connolly Jr., offensive tackle Oregon, 2nd round 61st overall Trey Amos, cornerback Ole Miss, 4th round 128th overall Jalen Lane, wide receiver Virginia Tech, 6th round 25th overall Kay Medrano, linebacker UCLA, and then in the 7th round 245th overall Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, running back Arizona. Connolly from Oregon was my OT3 with some of the highest highs on tape and a supreme athletic showcase during the combine to back up the movement skills we saw on the gridiron at 6'4", 315 pounds. Comes out of his stance low and can apply force effectively in the run game, but also instantly open the hips and execute challenging reach or scoop blocks and wide zone concepts. Buttery smooth redirecting to guys trying to maneuver around him as he climbs to the 2nd level or has to mirror pass rushers on an island, and he has the quick active feet to stay balanced as he's reading those guys while keeping his hands by his frame before landing impact strikes to dictate reps. There needs to be more purpose with fitting those mids and moving people against their will in a way that lives up to the potential he shows at times in that regard, and while he's improved in that area, too often he still grants edge rushers first meaningful contact inside, while his 200 punch can miss the mark and lead to him having to grab guys. But I think this guy's probable potential left tackle, and I had him rated slightly higher than 9th overall pick Kellen Banks Jr. out of Texas, going to the Saints. I think he's immediately in competition for the starting gig on the right side. That kind of went viral as Marshall Edge Mike Green caught him with his feet out of position and put him on his ass during one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. But I think he's still young enough to reprogram his brain to some degree after they just traded for Laramie Tunsil, and in a couple of years he may end up flipping back over. Trey Amos from Ole Miss in the 2nd round is a well-built corner at 6'1", 195 pounds, who really came into his own last year with the Rebels after beginning his career at Louisiana and then battling for snaps at Alabama the year prior. Brings a physical, sticky coverage profile with the balance to stay square at the line with long arms to disrupt receivers early in the route, but also pattern match at a high level in off-zone assignments, shows the instincts and playmaking skills to get his hands on plenty of footballs, attacking it in the air as if he was the wide receiver, and actively works downhill against the run while using his length well to pull off blockers and create early stops when the ball comes out to the perimeter as a strong face-up tackler. As good as the time speed is, I did see receivers get on top of Amos where he was playing too flat-footed and reached out with one arm, had to flip and try to catch back up. And receivers that can emphatically snap off curl or comeback routes can swipe and make him run by to create openings for the football. I thought there was a chance that this guy could sneak into the back end of round 1, and I wouldn't have thought that was crazy, so to get him here at the end of the second is excellent value, and I expect him to start right away from Washington. Mike Sainer still probably moves back to the start in year 2, where he excelled at during his time at Michigan. You see if Marshall and Lattimore can bounce back, but if you're running a heavy match or man-based scheme, this guy is a high-end number 2 from day 1. In round 4 with Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech, which by the way is the one pick the Commanders ended up with, along with Laramie Tunsil coming over from Houston, which the otherwise gave up a 3rd, a 7th, plus a 2 and 4th next year. Lane has the quick feet and slipperiness to put defenders in disadvantaged positions off the line, but also eats up the cushion of safeties, kept over the slot in a hurry, effectively rolls off either foot with speed cuts, consistently threatening to his quarterback as he flattens out of his breaks, and has soft hands. Plus then he's like a punt returner after the catch, with start-stop ability to shift directions and navigate around defenders, which is why the Hokies featured him quite a bit as a gadget player on fly sweeps, reverses and more. He basically never played on the ball and was asked to defeat press coverage, while there's room for a little more efficiency in his routes, and he's not someone who'll box out and win the ball for contact, with a career contested catch rate of just under 37%. But I'm a big Jalen Lane fan, not that I think he's a pencil-in starter for 2 wide receiver packages or anything like that, which makes it interesting as they took the 1-year fly on Deebo Samuel, because I'd expect him to be used very similarly early on. So maybe Washington looks at this as the protege to him, who can eventually beat at high volume target, who'd use on a bunch of motions and alert screens to him in the RPO game. I just question who the other outside receiver is supposed to be for them, along with Terry McLaurin. Noah Brown, KJ Osborne, Michael Gallup, who really knows? Kane Medrano from UCLA is on the light end for a linebacker, but really explosive, top in the position group with a 4.46 in the 40, and also finished top 5 in both of the jumps at the combine. Sees the action and closes down in a hurry when he spies pullers working to his sides, or he has to shut down plays to the perimeter, light on his feet as he toggles his eyes between the quarterback and receivers around him, and rapidly closes down on completions in front of him in zone coverage. And he'll put some hits on your quarterback before he can even scan the field when utilized as a blitzer if you don't account for him, which his block eluding skills and run defense could carry over to his rush package. Medrano is built like a bigger safety at best though, and doesn't bring a whole lot of thump into contact with other bodies in the box, which he tries to make up for with some over-aggressive pursuit angles. And he missed a massive 27 tackles last season, nearly a 21% miss rate for his career overall, especially when he didn't come to balance as a tackler in space. Washington re-signed Bobby Wagner for 1 more year, along with landing more of a hybrid play in Frankie Louvu this past offseason. I have high hopes long-term for last year's 5th round pick Jordan McGee, and Dominic Hampton may play some as a converted safety/linebacker, but Nick Beloy is a pure special teamer almost, so the path to playing time isn't as treacherous for Medrano as other 6th round rookies typically, but I think primarily his speed will be utilized in teams. And to close things out, Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, someone who only played 1 game last season due to a weird error by the NCAA because he redshirted a year in New Mexico, but someone else played with his jersey number, and that's why it kinda cost him the season by Arizona, but looked great in that one showing for them, and then continued to improve throughout Shrine Bowl week, ending up with the offensive MVP trophy in the actual game. Runs the ball with a change of pace and the ability to accelerate through hard planning cuts, where he can make some solo shifts to his tracks, but also more dramatic moves. Has that unorthodox running style where he'll cut off the wrong foot and throw some dead legs, but also willing to just hit downhill and plow through one shoulder of a linebacker in the hole. And he's an aggressive pass protector who consistently works inside out. But his running style is more so herky-jerky and rhythmic, and he excessively stutters in the backfield when he's not quite sure what he's seeing or has to figure out how to get around traffic. And he caught less than 1 pass per game for his career, and clearly lacked refinement to set up breaks or loop contact by linebackers as a route runner. So he was kind of a tough eval because the potential as a 215-pound back who runs in the mid-4.4s and posts a 41.5-inch vertical with this kind of determined running style is big time. But I think there may be some frustration with how he handles things conceptually and how much he can contribute on 3rd downs. Austin Eckler may be a late cut candidate if they feel comfortable with the rookie and Jeremy McNichols catching the ball consistently behind starter Brian Robinson, since Cliff Kingsbury doesn't ask much of his backs other than the basic outlets in the passing game. So there are two ways you can kind of look at this Washington draft class. Either you go name by name and say that they all came at solid value, but they'll benefit them in the long run, which was my big appeal to them, not getting caught up with how they shocked everyone by making it to the NFC Championship game last year, before you saw a clear difference in class to the division rival Eagles. On the other hand, this was after trading some substantial capital for Laremy Tunsil to take over at left tackle and sending a 5th rounder to San Francisco to see how much juice Deebo Samuel has left in the tank. Through that prism, I can question why they take a tackle who never played on the right side in college, a primary slot receiver after you just added Deebo. You ask Xander still to move back inside probably after a strong rookie year, and get another undersized linebacker after signing back B Wags on his last legs. It kind of feels like they're trying to get the best of both worlds, which I don't love necessarily, but also do think they found good value throughout the draft, even if I would have preferred them to have a few more shots at the apple, maybe trading back once or twice for a couple of extra picks. That however leads us to our NFC East draft rankings, one of the stronger divisions that we'll talk about collectively in this exercise. Philly remains at number 1, as they have been so many times in recent years. There are some haters out there saying that they always do the easy thing and take the top remaining names on consensus boards, but not only would that be a viable strategy as is, but I think they do so with a good grasp of the roster, and what I like particularly about this year's version is they weren't as hard-headed about positions that they typically value less, with a linebacker in the first and a safety at the end of the second, to continue adding to that defense that we saw take over the Super Bowl. They find a starting right tackle to replace Lane Johnson eventually, with how talented those two guys they picked late are, thanks to the in-house development. One of the best classes overall, I thought. Giants aren't too far behind that though. Really like what they did here. Abdul Carr is the no-brainer at 3, but then you plug in that final piece at the top of round 3 in Darius Alexander to really take that front to dominant levels potentially. Cam Scadaboo I love to represent Jersey and pair up with Tyron Tracy. Probably a starter by year 2, and someone can be a 6-man across those 3 interior spots at the very least in Marcus and Bo. And a super talented pass-catching tight end, who you got at a massive discount in round 7 due to some early career injuries. The trade for Jackson Dart at pick 25 is the only one I'm not fully on board with, but I understand that the current regime had to do it in this situation, and you get the 50 option without having to massively overpay. Dallas is strong number 3, a little surprising with Tyler Book at 12 when the athletic profile is so underwhelming, but he's an ass kick on tape, will add some attitude back to that unit. Two of my favorite D2 selections in terms of value in Donovan Siraku and Savon Revel, who may both be impact starters by 2026 at high value positions. You find what I believe could end up being a starting linebacker in Shamar James in round 5, a great swing tackle in the 6th, a quality backup nose in the 7th. The only selection I question is a Texas running back just inside the top 150, because his path to the field is somewhat muddy for me, but a strong class yet again. And finally, Washington is at the bottom, but they may be as high as number 2 in some other divisions. Again, I thought they found nice value with basically all of the 5 selections, but kind of trying to play both sides between making trades to quickly take advantage of this rookie quarterback window, but then select guys that may not be impact starters right away, or at least require some shuffling around with the pieces already in place. And I would have liked to see them add a couple of picks, maybe if opportunities were there, but nothing egregious that they did here at all. But that's gonna do it. NFC is in the books, back with the AFC in a couple of days. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. This is one of the bigger projects every year, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. If you have any questions, want to challenge me on anything I said today, or have suggestions for further off-season topics, I'd love to hear those in the comments. Do the champs still reign supreme, or can any of these 3 teams truly challenge Philly in 2025? As always, if you want to dive even deeper into the draft specifically, I have top 10 rankings for each position with player profiles, or on my site hello@footballtalk.com. That link and my social media channels are below in the video description. Once again, AFC East is up in a couple of days. So until then, see you later. Peace!